All right. So we were just talking a little bit before we got started. I know a couple people might not come today. When it is the end of the year, people take their breaks. Okay. They take their breaks, and I don't blame them. And so we will be wrapping up the year. We will be back here next year, next week, God willing. But we made this is our first full calendar year, so yay, that's a huge thing, I think. Well, we started last year in April, so we made it to the end of 2021, and then this was our first complete year. Yes, and so I thank you, Carla, Diamond, who's been on here, everybody who's came on since they have been, since they first started, continuously have come. And so that's a good thing. And so we are in First Samuel. And were there any questions or comments on anything that we read up until this point? I think we stopped at um chapter 12 last week. I had to look, I couldn't even remember because I think we went further than we initially anticipated. And so I had to call today to find out, call around to find out if we stopped. But anybody want to say anything about anything we covered up until this point in First Samuel? No, anything come to you? No. Can anybody give a recap of what we discussed last week up into chapter 12? Santa, can I call on you? No, not today. Okay, no problem. That's all right.
Sorry, Nicole, I was
Oh,
slow to remove the mute.
it's okay. And I know I was putting you on a spot. Is that okay to give a recap for last week? Do you remember?
Not really. I'm sorry.
Oh no, don't be sorry. It's okay. Look,
Not
I couldn't
really.
remember what chapter we did last week, so don't be sorry if you can't give a whole recap over the 3 chapters. It's okay. I was just putting it off on you because you gave us a good recap the other day. But we saw that Saul had came into position pretty much. And if you guys remember, the week before, we had kind of went into Romans a little bit. And I told you that when I believe that the Spirit had led us into Romans, it was going to be for a reason. And it was interesting because we kind of see this thing with Saul, where he goes from, just being called to kind of, changing up a little bit. And so, we kind of talk about ourselves a little bit and think about ourselves in positions of leadership. Um, it's always good to definitely, keep the Lord first, let Him direct you. I remember when I first started, my pastor, I used to ask him like a million questions, and I felt so ill prepared and unequipped for this. And he always said that's a good thing. He said that it would be bad if I felt too prepared, and so I'm thankful because I still feel ill prepared every week, and I still feel unequipped every single week. And that keeps me leaning on the Lord. And so I just show up, and I show up because that is what I just believe I'm called to do. And so we want to make sure that no matter what position God puts us in, that we kind of keep that, spirit of humility going, just being, just remaining humble, because it's easy. I'm not going to sit here and not say that it's not easy to get caught up sometimes, and especially if you are a person who do well, or everything that you touch, you're able to conquer. It's easy sometimes for people to just get caught up in the moment, to become a little self-righteous and to lose focus. And when we begin to kind of lean on our own strength, our own understanding, we can not seek the Lord as much. And it's not that we go in there like that. We can, and sometimes do change, and it's not something that won't take place. I don't think that there's too many people that actually go in and say, this is what I want to do, that this is something that I want to go in and I want to take over, and I don't want to, listen to the Lord. I think we all kind of come in humble, very humble, especially knowing what our beginnings are, and then something tends to happen. All right. And so that's why I believe that our little detour into the book of Romans was about, and we'll probably, just go back and take a peek in there. But for now, we're going to get started on 1 Samuel chapter 13 for today. Do I have that right? It is 1 Samuel chapter 13. Is that where we left off at 12 last week? Or I just want to make sure that I don't have it wrong. Nobody know. Okay, well, guess what? We're gonna go with it. Huh? What'd you say, Katrina?
I can't remember. I thought it was 11, but it may have been 12.
It may have been, well, okay, so chapter 12 was Samuel's farewell address. And so I think we covered that. We definitely covered the farewell address. Do you remember that?
Yeah, okay, I remember now.
You remember that? Okay. And so what I couldn't remember is if we did chapter 13, and we're off a little bit because we went further than we anticipated. So that's why we're off. But we'll go ahead in 1 Samuel chapter 13. I truly believe that if we are reading it for a second time, that there's something that we probably missed, something that we needed to get. And so it's not going to hurt to go back if that's what we wind up doing. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And all right, so 1 Samuel 13, it says Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 42 years. Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel and sent the rest of the men home. He took 2,000 of the chosen men with him to Michmash on the hill country of Bethel. The other 1,000 went with Saul's son Jonathan to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Soon after this, Jonathan attacked and defeated the garrison of Philistines at Geba. The news spread quickly among the Philistines. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, Hebrews, hear this, rise up and revolt. All Israel heard the news that Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba, and the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as a grain of sand on the seashore. They camped in Michmash east of Beth Aven. The men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves, thickets, rocks, holes, and cisterns. Some of them crossed the Jordan River and escaped in the land of Gad and Gilead. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were trembling with fear. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier, but Samuel still didn't come. Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away. So he demanded, bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering himself. Just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to meet and welcome him, but Samuel said, what is this that you've done? Saul replied, I saw my men scattering from me, and you didn't arrive when you said that you would, and the Philistines are at Michmash ready for battle. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came. How foolish, Samuel exclaimed. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must end. For the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. Samuel then left Gilgal and went on his way, but the rest of the troops went with Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Then Saul counted the men who were still with him. He found only 600 were left. Saul and Jonathan and the troops with them were staying in Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. The Philistines set up their camp at Michmash. 3 raiding parties soon left the camp of the Philistines. One went north towards Ophrah in the land of Shual. Another went west to Beth Horon, and the third moved towards the border above the valley of Zebulun near the wilderness. There were no blacksmiths in the land of Israel in those days. The Philistines wouldn't allow them to for fear they would make swords and spears for the Hebrews. So whenever the Israelites needed to sharpen their plowshares, picks, axes, or sickles, they had to take them to a Philistine blacksmith. The charges were as follows: a quarter of an ounce of silver for sharpening a plowshare or a pick, and an eighth of an ounce for sharpening an axe or making the point of an axe gold. So on that day of the battle, none of the people of Israel had a sword or spear except for Saul and Jonathan. The pass at Michmash had meanwhile been secured by a contingent of the Philistine army. And so from this text that we just read, what are some of the things that stand out to you guys or you ladies? Do we see a difference in Saul's actions from the previous chapters? Are y'all quiet because y'all don't know the answer? Can y'all not hear me? I'm not sure.
Yeah, for me, there is a big difference between what we read the past weeks and what we are reading today, because Saul was not patient enough to wait for God's priest to come and do the sacrifice. He did it himself, not because he felt the pressure from the people. It's like he was more considering the people than what God said. That looks really different between what we read when he was hiding and we were wondering, was it out of humility or was it because he was not feeling worthy to be chosen? But today is completely different for me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for pointing that out. That was one of the first things that stood out to me as well, was the fact that he was not patient enough to wait. I mean, when he, took things into his own hands, it's, I was like, well, wow, he would be the one to offer the burnt offering, offer the offering and not wait for Samuel. And it's not like Samuel never arrived, he did. But that just shows the impatience. Had he just waited a little while longer, he was coming. And so that's a good point. So what do that say? Have we ever found ourselves in that type of situation where we get to a point where we are supposed to either wait on the Lord, wait on direction, wait on leadership, just wait on whatever it is that we're waiting on, but we just decide that I'm not waiting, I'm going to do this on my own.
Nicole, before we go any further, something that we pointed out last week was humility and being humble. And neither one of those things applied to this text when it came to him.
Yep. and that's what we had touched on right before we started reading this, about why it's necessary for us to remain in a position of being humble and being, having that humility. I know that I think last week, if I'm not mistaken, I gave the example of how when I first was licensed and then I found myself going through so much, and I was so worried about how it would look to my friends, like if God wasn't, would not be represented well in my life because of what I was going through. Do y'all remember that? Me sharing that story?
Yeah.
Okay. And not really realizing that while I'm worrying, not saying I shouldn't have been worrying about them, but I really didn't have anything to worry about. What I went through was such a humbling experience. And I do thank God, because one of the first things that I did when I first received my minister's license, and remember I wanted to be promoted at my job, and one of the first things that I did was ask God if he would wait for me. I only had 8 more years until I was going to retire, and I wanted him to wait for me. And, and I was bold enough to ask that. And then afterwards, I guess God said no, and I was not allowed to wait for him. Actually, I was placed in a position that I would really no longer be able to do anything without him. I had to wait on his instruction for everything. And I thank God for that, because it was a very humbling experience. Doing that was extremely humbling, and had things not gone that route, with me being bold enough to ask God something like that, which meant that I definitely wasn't putting him and his work first, that I was putting myself and my desires before anything else, then what if I would have continued that way? What type of a servant leader would I have been had I been able to continue on that path and not have had to go on a path of humility, because it was very humbling. And everything about my journey at that point was extremely humbling. And so, with us, sometimes we think that we go through things and it's like, well, why do I have to, go through this? Or why do I have to suffer? We might look at another person, but it's almost like we have to sit back and we have to thank God that we can carry that spirit of humility, because if we don't, then we can, easily become like Saul and begin to be disobedient and not patient, and begin to believe that we could do the things that God has not given us the authority to do.
One thing that I noticed was that it said that Jonathan had won against the Philistines, and there was no worship, there was no thankfulness, there was no, it was, they went from being at a high level to going straight to being scared, almost as if they forgot that quickly that, where they were carried through and protected, and then straight to fearing.
Are you around verse 3, where it says Jonathan had attacked and defeated the garrison?
The garrisons,
Okay.
yeah.
That's something interesting to point out, right? So it says the news spread quickly among the Philistines, so Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, Hebrews, rise up, hear this, rise up and revolt. And then all Israel heard the news that Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba, and that the Philistine now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join saw at Gilgal. And then it says they mustered up a mighty army of 3,000 chariots and 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as a grain of sand in the seashore. And so that's when the men of Israel saw what a tight spot that they were in. And because they were hard pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide at that point. So what do we think happened when, Jonathan had, what do we see happening based on the text? Because sometimes when people might not know how mighty and strong you are until you do something big. Do you think it brought attention to them?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It brought attention to them. And one of the things that stand out to me about this is where it says that in verse 5, where it says that they mustered up the mighty army. Do you think that now, instead of them having, the confidence that the Lord was going to bring them through this, that now they begin to look with their eyes, right? And see, like, wait a minute, I don't know if it doesn't even appear that we can, that we can win in a battle against them again. That's what I see out of the text. Does anybody see that or see something different?
That's what I see too. Like they lost the faith.
Mhm.
Faith in them.
Yeah.
And they were also only looking at things from the perspective of their own strength.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so do we tend to do that? Is that something that we in our own lives do?
All the time. We do it all the time.
Exactly. Exactly. We do that all the time. We do that with most things, but if we were able to look at things and, just see within our own strength what we were able to carry out, will we even have a need for faith? Would you have a need for faith if you were able to look in your bank account, and purchase anything that you wanted to purchase and do anything that you wanted to do, and you could fix anything because you have the money to do it? Would you ever have the need to have faith at that point?
You really wouldn't. But on the flip side, if we took time to go back and meditate on the ways that he's helped us through, then we should have enough faith to know that we can get through, the current situation, which, it gets bad. And then we immediately go to, oh, why is this happening to me?
Right, but we tend to lose focus, and that's one of the reasons why, like what we were saying before, we kind of find ourselves in these situations that keep us in a place where we have no choice but to have faith, because it's hard, it's distracting, having more or being in certain positions allow us to be distracted, allow us to not focus on the Lord and what he's doing. And for me, that's the visual that I get here. Once you see that, once you start looking not at what the Lord could do, because he could do anything. Remember Gideon? Remember how many people did Gideon go to battle with? Anybody remember?
I think
60?
was it 300?
300. That's right. He went with 300. And not even knowing what was going to happen, but by stepping out on faith with those 300. And what did he start out with? I think he started with, was it like 30,000?
Yeah, thousands.
Right. And then it came down that all he had when the time came was 300, but yet and still, look at what the Lord has done. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why when after Moses and after Joshua, the Lord just kept reminding, he would always find the need to remind them of who he was. And that's the way it is in our life. Like we need those constant reminders of who the Lord is, you know, and especially we think that we need him more when we're going through something. No, even when we're on top, where we think that we have everything, we need those constant reminders of who the Lord is, because number one, we could get into a place where we feel like, well, we got so much going on, we don't need him. We might not say those things, but we could see it, or we're looking at what we have and feel that we're comfortable, and we don't find ourselves praying for things as much. But then we do, you know, but when we're in a tight spot, okay, when we're in a tight spot, like it says, the men of Israel saw that they were in a tight spot. That's what it says in verse 6, you know, and that they were hard pressed by the enemy. Then they tried to hide. And sometimes those are the things that we want to do when we're in a place. We might hide and then pray. Some of us might go pray and then we hide, or some of us might just go into prayer. But a lot of times we don't go into these places until we're in a tight spot. And that is one of the reasons why we go through the things that we go through sometimes. This might not be for you. It definitely might be for me, because I know I find myself in tight spots often. I find myself in places where, you know, I can't get too comfortable, because, you know, the Lord is going to, and maybe that's because he knows me. Maybe he knows that, you know what, if I want her to do something, she might ask me to wait, or she might want to go ahead and put me in a, you know, in a back burner, like I tried to do when I was first licensed. And let me not even go there. What I've always tried to do my whole walk, because to be honest with you, even when the Lord was calling me before that, you know, there were things that I wanted to do. I wanted to, you know, get things out of my system. I didn't want to talk to people he wanted me to talk to. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to commit to that. And so I know for me, I had a serious habit of putting the Lord down. And trust me, if I didn't have anything to pray for, or if I wasn't going through anything, I didn't. It wasn't until I had a need that I learned how to pray. And even in these days, and I'll be 100% honest with you, I come here every week and I thank God for coming, and I thank God for participating, because it keeps me in my word. But if I didn't have to be here, I probably would not be in the word as much. I probably wouldn't. And even when it comes to my prayer life, you know, I pray, but sometimes I realize I don't pray in the spirit like I know that I could, unless I'm really going through something. And I don't really want it to be like that, because God knows I'm tired of going through things. You know, I'm tired of worrying about things I don't want to, but also it's just a fact that until I'm in these spots, I don't seek him the way that I do. But I'm also thankful, and I will say this again, and I've said it plenty of times. God knows I don't like to suffer and I don't like to go through, but I still would prefer to be on this side of suffering as opposed to, okay, not going to him at all, and then, you know, being in a position to where now I'm just straight being disobedient, or I'm taking matters into my own hands. And that's what we're seeing, you know, Saul do here. We see that because Saul got to a place where he's not the same person that was hiding and wouldn't come out and didn't have the confidence that, you know, he was necessarily equipped to do what the Lord had called him to do, because he didn't put himself in that position. Now we see somebody, you know, who is not humble at all. And now he's not even patient enough to wait. And he's believing that he's able, because of what he sees, okay? Because of what he sees. So there's a lack of faith, you know, but because of what he sees, he just takes it upon himself. He don't have the patience to sit here and wait to see if Samuel was coming or not. He wanted the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, and he sacrificed the burnt offering himself, and he was out of line for doing that. And sometimes we are out of line in the things that we do. Even with what God has given us as the gifts that we have. He might have given you a certain type of gift, but is he calling you to use it at that time? Is it for him and his glory, or is it for you? Is it because you want, you want not to be scared, or maybe you want that notoriety, or you feel like you just could? Because even no matter where you are in the Lord, no matter where you are in your position, you still have to seek him in all things, everything. And we shouldn't be operating outside of his spirit with anything. And so we see, we see with we see with Saul what happens with that. But like with all things, when we study, and I don't want us to just look at Saul, I want us to look at ourselves. I want us to look at our situations. And I'm telling you now, if anybody, sometimes we just got to be thankful while you're going through something. If you're going through something in your life, it just doesn't feel good. And sometimes it's hard to press through, and it's hard to pray because we feel like, are we being punished for something? Did I do something years ago, that's catching up with me now? Or, God, are you not hearing my prayers because I want you to do something? But how do we not know? Maybe we need to look back and see, are we in this situation because he wants us to be praying. He wants us to be seeking, and he wants us to not make a move, and might put us in a position that we can't make a move without him. And if we do, it could be detrimental. But this is one of the reasons why, we have to be in that relationship with God. We have to, because it's easy. It is easy to walk out. We're not going to sit here and we're not going to judge Saul like if what he did is not something that we do all the time. Any thoughts, any questions, any concerns?
One thing that jumped out to me was that they were hiding. And it made me think about the Garden of Eden when Adam was hiding. And, God came out and he was like, Adam, where are you? And it wasn't that he didn't know where he was, but he wasn't where he was supposed to be, because they usually walk together in the cool of the day, and he wasn't in his rightful place. And then I started thinking about how David hid in a cave when he was feeling discouraged, and the men were also gathered there, and basically they needed a leader, and they were asking him to step up and be their leader. And so, David was, to be a leader and to be eventually the king. And with him hiding or hiding out or waiting out in the cave, feeling bad for himself, he wasn't in the position that he was supposed to be in. And so each of those times they were hiding, or, not where they're supposed to be. They're not in their place that they're supposed to be, which my pastor normally calls righteousness. And so they were out of order, basically. And so in all three of those situations, whenever they were hiding, they weren't with God, or also in their positions.
Meaning that, you hiding out because you done wrong. Is it
So
something?
instead of we're hiding rather than going to him, or we're hiding rather than trusting in him, or,
It made me think when you mentioned Adam and you said him hiding, and I don't know why he thought that he could hide from God, but he knew. Well, I guess it wasn't so much that he felt shame all of a sudden. He felt shame, that he didn't have before he did what he wasn't supposed to do. And so it might show a pattern, like you said, of, when people are in a certain position, if I'm saying what you said right, if not, please feel free to correct me. When people are in a position that they're not supposed to be in, that they will begin to hide or won't have that confidence. Because think about this, if we didn't have the confidence of the Lord, or we not in the Lord's you know, if we didn't have the confidence, would we hide out a little bit more? Would you hide out a little bit more? I mean, think about this. And I'm not saying when you were in school and you were asked to give an answer for a test that you didn't study for, were you the first one to raise your hand, or did you try to hide behind somebody so that you wasn't going to be the one that was called on?
True. Yeah, the hiding out part.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm not sure if that was going back to what you were, you know, saying, Valencia, but that was just kind of like the visual that I had. But when we're confident, or when you're confident in anything, if you're confident that you know the answer and the question is asked, what are you going to do? Are you going to hide, or are you going to raise your hand? And so I think when we're confident, you know, we step forward. And a lot of times with that confidence, the confidence can't, well, in a situation like this, the confidence can't come from something physical. It can't come from leaning on your own strength. The type of confidence that they needed had to come from the Lord. Am I making any sense here? Because it's hard when y'all quiet. You know, y'all make me almost
You're
want to
making
hide.
sense.
You're making plenty of sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because I just want to make sure, because when you're quiet sometimes, I mean, and even that, and I'll use this as an example. It is, if you guys were, you know, talking back, when we have those moments when you talk back, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I could keep on going because you got the confidence that it makes sense, or people are getting it, you know. But then when you don't, or you don't hear anything, you need the confidence of the Lord to come out, because it will make you want to go back and hide, like, well, maybe I don't have the strength to do this. Maybe what I'm saying doesn't make sense, so I don't want to show my face. And maybe this is one of the reasons why when we're in, you know, certain places we could be in, there is a lot of theatrics and there is a lot of things to provoke emotion. Why? Because certain things like that will give you a sense of confidence, might be a false sense of confidence, but it'll give you a sense of confidence to make you go on. But when we don't have that, when we're not leaning on the Lord, because sometimes no matter how I feel, if you guys are quiet or if you guys are talking, no matter what, I can't sit here. I could tell you how it would make me feel. I could tell you now, it's not easy to do this every week in front of gray boxes. If you ever look at this on the YouTube, or you see, if there's no pictures up, or people's faces are not there, all you're seeing is gray boxes. If nobody talks to you, it feels like there's nothing there. You have to have the confidence of the Lord that this is what he's calling you to do in order to continue. You have to. Because if we're looking at what I have in front of me, if y'all don't have, you know, 16 people sitting here talking back and jumping over each other, cutting each other off to respond, you know, then I have to have something, because other than that, that's the thing that would keep us going. So yes, looking at a mighty chariot of 3,000 people, 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, you know, they probably look and they're like, I can't go against that. So I'm a hide out, because I don't have the confidence in the Lord that he could do it. Or just like Adam, you know, I no longer have the confidence because in his particular case, he was carrying shame or whatever it is. But we have to have that confidence that Adam had before they ate of the fruit, that confidence that I could be naked, I could just go freely because I have the Lord with me, and there's nothing that has, I don't see anything that has divided us. I don't see anything that has separated us. Same thing with Saul. Saul did this because at one couple chapters ago, he had the confidence of the Lord. He don't have that now, and they're following him. And what he do? He didn't even have the confidence to say, you know, come out of this. He knew what he needed. He knew what he needed, but he was in a position himself as a leader where he's feeling desperate, like y'all not moving fast enough. We ain't gonna be able to beat them. Samuel, you not here. We gotta do what we gotta do. He knew he needed the Lord. He just went about it the wrong way.
And if we remember Aaron, It reminds me of Aaron. He had a moment like that with the people where they built the calf when Moses was taking a little too long, and they was like, what is going on here, brother? So it is that moment of like, listen, because as I was reading this earlier, I was thinking like, yes, what he did was wrong, but his intention was still good. Like he still was like, okay, well, this is what we would normally do to serve and to praise and to, show our appreciation and our thankfulness. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it because he probably told us to do this anyway. So I think that's kind of like he kind of made, like they said, you make an executive decision in the moment. When I was reading earlier, I had to kind of think about that, and I thought about Aaron too. Like he had that moment with the people, So his intent, even though I know your intent means nothing when the action is what it is, but his intent wasn't to do harm.
Yeah. It was just driven by fear. That's what it was. It was driven by fear. And it did remind me of Aaron as well, because Moses was taking a little too long and he could not, or he felt that he could not control the people. And even with our own selves, and that's one of the reasons why I like us to get into the story. I don't want us to just focus on it, the history of it, but focus on ourselves. Think about yourself and how you feel when you are waiting. Can anybody think of waiting on the Lord for something and it just doesn't look like he is moving fast enough? Or, wait, I mean, y'all know, I all the time. Like, Lord, I need you to open this up now. I need you to do this now. And if not, I'm going to do this in the meanwhile. We have those in the meanwhile moments. Not that you completely have lost focus, but you just don't have it in you to say, I could really sit here and not make any moves and just have the complete confidence that I'm going to wait on you. But when we want God to do something, we want him to do it now. We get scared. And you're right, Amber, for pointing that out. He knew what to do. He didn't completely take it in his own hands. He just moved outside of, his authority in that one. And it was a lack of faith. He just didn't have the patience to wait. But we do that all the time. All right. So going into 1 Samuel 14, so it says, one day Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come on, let's go. Go over to where the Philistines have their outposts. But Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. Meanwhile, Saul and his 600 men were camped on the outskirts of Gibeah, around the pomegranate tree at Migron. Among Saul's men was Ahijah the priest, who was wearing the ephod, the priestly vest. Ahijah was the son of Ichabod, brother Ahidam, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord, who had served at Shiloh. No one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp to reach the Philistine outpost. Jonathan had to go down between two rocky cliffs that were called Bozez and Sina. The cliff on the north was in front of Michmash, and the one on the south was in front of Geba. Sorry. Let's go across to the outpost of the pagans, Jonathan said to his armor bearer. Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He will win a battle, whether he has many warriors or few. Do you think it's best, the armor bearer replied? I'm with you completely, whatever you decide. All right, then, Jonathan told him, we will cross over and let them see us. If they say to us, stay where you are or we will kill you, then we'll stop and not go up to them. But if they say, come up and fight, then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them. When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes. Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, come up here and we'll teach you a lesson. Come on, climb right behind me, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, for the Lord will help us defeat them. So they climbed up using both hands and feet, and the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed those who came behind him. They killed some 20 men in all, and their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly, panic broke out in the Philistine army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outposts and raiding parties. And just then an earthquake struck, and everyone was terrified. Saul's lookouts in Gibeah of Benjamin saw a strange sight. The vast army of Philistines began to melt away in every direction. Call the roll and find out who's missing, Saul ordered. And when they checked, they found that Jonathan and his armor bearer were gone. Then Saul shouted to Ahijah, bring the ephod here. But at that time, Ahijah was wearing an ephod in front of the Israelites. But while Saul was talking to the priest, the confusion in the Philistine camp grew louder and louder. So Saul said to the priest, never mind, let's get going. Then Saul and all his men rushed out to the battle and found the Philistines killing each other. There was a terrible confusion everywhere. Even the Hebrews who had previously gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined in with Saul, Jonathan, and the rest of the Israelites. Likewise, the men of Israel who were hiding in the hill country of Ephraim joined the chase when they saw that the Philistines running away. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle continued to rage even beyond Beth-aven. Now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day because Saul had placed them under an oath saying, let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies. So no one ate anything all day, even though they had all found honeycomb on the ground in the forest. They didn't dare touch the honey because they all feared the oath they had taken. But Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of the stick into a piece of honeycomb and ate the honey. And after he eaten it, he felt refreshed. But one of the men saw him and said, your father made the army take a strict oath that anyone who eats food today will be cursed. That is why everyone is weary and faint. My father has made trouble for all of us, Jonathan exclaimed. A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey? If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food that they found among our enemies, think how many more Philistines we could have killed. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Ajalon, growing more and more faint. That evening, they rushed for the battle plunder and butchered the sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, but they ate them without draining their blood. Someone reported to Saul, look at the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that still has blood in it. That is very wrong, Saul said. Find a large stone and roll it over here. Then go out among the troops and tell them, bring the cattle, sheep, and goats here to me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat in them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it. So that night, all the troops brought their animals and slaughtered them there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first of the altars he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every last one of them. His men replied, we'll do whatever you think is best. But the priest said, let's ask God first. So Saul asked God, should we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them? But God made no reply that day. Then Saul said to the leaders, something's wrong. I want all my army commanders to come here. We must find out what sin was committed today. I vow by the name of the Lord who rescued Israel for that sinner will surely die, even if it's my own son Jonathan. But no one would tell him what the trouble was. Then Saul said, Jonathan and I will stand over here, and all of you stand over there. And the people responded to Saul, whatever you think is best. Then Saul prayed, O Lord, God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent. Then they cast sacred lots. and Jonathan and Saul were chosen as the guilty ones, and the people were declared innocent. Then Saul said, now cast lots again and choose between me and Jonathan. And Jonathan was shown to be the guilty one. Tell me what you have done, Saul demanded of Jonathan. I tasted a little honey, Jonathan admitted. It was only a little bit at the end of my stick. Does that deserve death? Yes, Jonathan, Saul said, you must die. May God strike me and even kill me if you do not die for this. But the people broke in and said to Saul, Jonathan has won this great victory for Israel. Should he die? Far from it. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair on his head will be touched. But God helped him to do a great deed today. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul called back the army from chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines returned home. Now, when Saul had secured his grasp on Israel's throne, he fought against his enemies in every direction, against Moab, Ammon, Edom, and the kings of Zobah and the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he was victorious. He performed great deeds and conquered the Amalekites, saving Israel from all those who had plundered them. Saul's sons included Jonathan, Ishbosheth, and Malchishua. He had two daughters, Merab, who was the older, and Michal. Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. The commander of Saul's army was Abner, the son of Saul's uncle Ner. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were sons of Abiel. The Israelites fought constantly with the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. So whenever Saul observed a young man who was brave and strong, he drafted him into his army. And so I want to ask, after listening to chapter 14 of 1 Samuel, what stood out to you?
I don't know. I guess for me, just if I take it back to the beginning, before Saul even became king and what God said he was going to do. And it made me go back to the, he's gonna do this in the chariots and he's gonna draft, and that's kind of what I thought about once I read it. Honestly, that was one of the first things that stood out.
Because you already know how this is gonna end for Saul.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, check, like the list of things God told them in the beginning, like, all right, y'all, if y'all want a king, this is what he's gonna do. I was like, oh, check, so that was kind of that's kind of what stood out to me.
So what are you seeing as, if you don't mind, like one check that you've seen off of here?
Just him being that ruler that's taking the sons and drafting them, and that military army side of him. I haven't seen the other ones that he kind of named, but that side for sure.
Yeah, he knew what would happen when the people wanted, when they wanted a king. He definitely knew who he was putting into position, and why, even though it didn't seem like this was going to be the type of king that Saul was in the very beginning, but God knew. So that's definitely one thing to stand out. Was there anything else to stand out from the text for anybody else? What about the way Saul treated one of the first things that kind of stood out to me first was Jonathan's strength, Jonathan's faith. That's the first thing that stood out to me. It wasn't about Saul, but it was really about Jonathan in the very beginning. Just looking at the fact of what Jonathan said, to his armor bearer, like, the Lord will help us, perhaps he will, and for nothing can hinder the Lord. And so even if it was just going to be the two of them, he wasn't afraid to move. He was not afraid at that point. It was like, well, whatever the Lord, he'll help us perhaps, nothing could hinder us. And he said that he can win a battle, whether he has many warriors or a few. And this is opposite of what we've seen in the last chapter. And so just having that kind of faith, don't we see we're having that kind of faith makes a difference? Not only that, one of the things that stand out to me is that, you know, even when we look at the previous chapter, you know, how time seems to be a little different when you are operating in fear as opposed to faith. You know, it was like when they were operating in, you know, fear, it's like, I can't wait, you know, this is taking too long, you're taking too long to move. And, you know, with it being them, the fact that Jonathan only, he just operated in faith, even though it was the two of them, it's like, I'm not even gonna step back, we're gonna move forward and we're gonna see what happens when we get there. And so that makes me think about how different time is. And really, it's just a matter of our actions, right? It's just a matter of our actions of what we want. When we have confidence in something, that something is going to happen, you know, we could take all the time in the world. We don't have to worry about it. But when you don't have that confidence that this thing is going to happen, it's like, you know, well, I'll keep moving forward to catch up. You know, when you don't have that confidence, it's like, no, that panic sets in. Excuse me, that panic sets in. It's like, no, I don't know what's going to happen. I need to see something happening right now. This is not happening fast enough for me. But when you know that something's going to happen, you could just walk in any direction at any time, any place, you could just move forward. And that's you know, for me, that was a difference. That's something that stood out to me. It was really Jonathan. And not only that, well, is there anything anybody want to say about that before I move forward?
For me, I've been talking about Old Testament versus New Testament, and or Old Covenant versus the New Covenant. And so you saw Jonathan, and he walked in faith, and he was supposed to be killed because he ate the honey, but by grace he was saved. Where you had Saul, and Saul was very into the rules, like the Old Testament. And, you know, well, he didn't follow the rules, you know, we got to murder him. But, you know, we're in the New Testament where Saul is, where we're saved by grace and by our faith. And that's what I saw.
That was a really good, excellent example of seeing an illustration of Old Testament versus New Testament. Excellent. We saw that play out right before our eyes. And like you said, that you made such a key point that he was saved by grace through faith. Excellent point. That was a really good illustration right there. Anybody else? Nobody else. All right. So then I looked, and one of the other things that stood out to me was, you know, the fact that now, you know, now that the Philistines started to fall, you know, before Jonathan and, you know, the armor bearer was able to kill him. And I thought back to how many people they had, you know, aside them, but even though it was only like 20 of them in the beginning, you know, just the fact that, you know, that the panic was breaking out and that things were happening, it seemed like, oh, okay, things are being shaken up over there. Now it's like, now Saul could come out, you know, now Saul has that confidence, you know, now Saul, you know, wanted to move forward. And, you know, now I'm thinking about what Valencia said, you know, just that being under the law and not being under grace and having that faith, you know, we see that Saul is a very visual person. We see that Saul, we're learning, at least that's something that I'm saying, that Saul is a person that I have to see it to believe it, to have the confidence to go out. And we see how different Jonathan is. And one of the things that started to stand out to me as well was the oath that, you know, he put forward, because I'm thinking like it was only two of them and we saw what the Lord was going to do. So now, Saul, when you want to go out there and you want to bring your army, why are you so concerned about them saving their strength? Why are it's, are we seeing that? I know I'm definitely seeing this. It's like he's I guess, like Amber pointed out, it's not that I don't want to say he has faith, but I guess he has that Lord, like I believe, I believe, right? But I don't have the faith to believe.
It's almost like I hid once, I ain't hiding no more, and this is what it is. Like, if y'all want me to take this job over, this is what we got to do to win. That's it. So it sounds like he means well, like we got to bring this home. But Jonathan almost seems like you said, he is leading by faith, and we see the difference. Jonathan, like, no, we need to eat. Like, who told y'all that? Because I am refreshed eating this little bit of honey. So, but yeah, Saul is more so like that military dad, like, we by the book and we gonna get this victory because we won before. And it almost is like you said, I'm surprised that Saul is like that, seeing what God has done. Because it's almost like you still, maybe it's a sense of control he now has, or maybe with his confidence came a little bit of arrogance too, so it's almost like, I don't want to say he don't believe that, God is still their leader, because he still was talking about sacrificing, but it was almost like, okay, maybe he getting a little cocky with this too. Like, this, I am who he chose, so I don't know.
I believe he is, in a sense, because it stood out to me a little bit before, where in verse 24, where it says that, that the men of Israel were pressed into exhaustion that day, after he placed them under the oath, and he said, let a full curse fall on anyone who eats before this evening, before I have revenge on my enemies. Before I have revenge on my enemies. So that sound personal. This is something that he wants to do. So we see a lot of, Saul taking things into, it's like he acknowledges God, but we seeing so much more of self in this. And
Yeah.
because I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody want to say something?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, he is getting like a little arrogant. Like, just like when he was telling them, let's chase the Philistines all night and do this to blah blah to sunrise and destroy all of them. Like, and then the priest stepped in like, wait, let's ask God first. Like, because through all this, I feel like he just going gang ho himself. This is all about, my leadership. Follow me. This is what I say. This is going on. He's not even referring back to God for real.
Yeah. And I mean, you are 100% right. And that this is what we're seeing as being his destruction right there. And so let me just ask y'all a question. Do you think that it's possible for us to have God in our lives, or acknowledge him, but just not follow him? Does that make sense?
It does.
I think it happens all the time. Like a few weeks back, you were talking about being busy, like we get involved in church, but we're not necessarily, we're doing all this stuff for the church, but we're not actually a part of it, or like our focus, just like Saul here, our focus is off. We're not thinking about the right things. He's too worried about getting revenge, and y'all can't eat this and you can only eat that and we all can only rest in, but his focus isn't on God.
It makes me think about work as well, when you was giving that example, Valencia. It made me think about the task at hand. Like sometimes people just want positions and they want tasks, and I want to do this and I want to do that, and everything becomes about that task. But you're not even concerned about the people that it's affecting. you know, you're not. And then we have to think that when we're in a position of leadership, whatever that is, and that position of leadership could easily be you being a parent. It could be in your job, it could be in your ministry, it could be anything, but just even understanding how being that leader, how, like, what are we instilling in those who are following us? Because, you know, just they feared, they didn't dare touch the honey because they feared that oath that they had taken. Because once again, they're more so looking at what Saul the leader is saying.
So maybe part of the lesson was that when we're not where we're supposed to be in God, that we're also cause effects towards other people. It's not just us, but other people are involved when we're not doing or being or paying attention to him, focusing when our focus is off. It affects other people more so than just ourselves.
Absolutely. Exactly. We have to be very careful of that. And a lot of people don't. We see a lot of people, you know, a lot of people just really don't have that relationship. And a lot of people probably do, but a lot of people don't, right? A lot of people don't know. Some people don't have exposure, whatever it is, you know, whatever it is. But we have to understand that it can't just be about I don't want to say not just about the word, but it can't just be about I know so much, follow me, but you got to really understand the people that's following you, you know, understanding the position that you're in, understanding that if this person doesn't have a relationship with God for themselves or don't know what they're doing, that they're looking to you. And so you need to be doing everything that you can to make sure that that person stays in a healthy place. You know, really, my belief is that, you know, I'm not doing anything as a leader if I'm not leading you to the leader, because technically I'm just not. Maybe, you know, you could be, remember in school, I don't know, well, I don't know what your schools might have done, but I remember going to school, you know, you had the teacher, but then they used to have these line leaders, right? And so, you know, you were like the example, you stood in front of the line, but at the end of the day, you was just another kid. But it's the way that you walk, and it was, you know, your ability to have the other kids follow your lead. You guys were really on the same level. They just was the line leader, so you have to be careful, because technically if the teacher looked back, you all could get in trouble. So you wanted to make sure that whatever you did, that you just modeled that walk very well.
It's interesting you use that example, because that happened before the break at my school. I had to make a kid a line leader because they fourth graders and they still want to do that. And he was walking down the hallway and he was like doing this giddy up dance. And I was like, Keith. I said, so you can't be my line leader no more. I said, because you can't even show the rest of them how to lead. So, I mean, how to walk. So when we went to the next transition, I put him in the back of the line. And he was upset. I was like, he's like, but I'm the line leader. I'm like, no, you're not. I said, I don't trust you to lead my line nowhere. I said, you giddy up like a cowboy. You got to go to the back, brother. So he was upset, but he had to be moved. And it's just like with God and Saul, like, I'm sorry, but this is not what we going to do. You know, because first of all, I didn't even want these people to have you, but they insisted. So I made you this and I trusted you and you showed that you couldn't handle it. So now I have to move on. You know, so it's funny that you brought that up, because I promise you I had to break a kid heart with that. Had to move him to the back of the line.
Well, we see these lessons play out in our life. That's one of the reasons why I like to break the Bible study down the way that we do. I mean, it's a great book, you know, it's the basic instructions before leaving earth, you know, it's everything. But I really like for us to see how this plays out in our life. It's the living word. And so with any situation, with anybody that you read in, take, you know, scratch Saul, put your name, you know, scratch Jonathan, put your whatever, and just watch how this plays out in your life. You know, I see the word come alive in my life, just like the way you just did with the whole line leader example. You know, we probably went after, oh, this experience that we're seeing with Paul is like being a line leader in school. We might not think about that, when we first read it, but at the end of the day, all our life is a repetition of examples of what the word is. It is still the living word. I don't see that there's too much that we will read about that we can't put it in our life. Even when we talked about, Moses, and we talked about the Red Sea, because some people be like, oh, there's no way, there's no Red Sea, there's no way the waters could stand up straight and part. Okay, well, even if it's not waters, I want you to think about a situation that seemed almost impossible to go through, but somehow God made things stand still and God paved a way for you and you were able to get through it. Think about that. It doesn't have to be that it was waters that stood up still. You don't, if your imagination can't go there, or you want to say that it's not real, but I bet you have had a situation that seemed almost impossible for you to walk through, and God made things stand still until you were able to walk through. And so there's nothing that we could read about or nothing in here that we don't see and see God move that we can't put that in our own lives. And that is why this Bible study is not, I am nobody's Bible scholar. God knows that. Okay. God knows that. I believe he had to call me for him to be able to get the glory, because he knows that. But it's so elementary that you should be able to look at it in your own life and just see him through it. It doesn't matter. I cannot hardly pronounce any of them people names, not because number one, it's hard to pronounce, and number two, I got these braces on my mouth, so that just makes it doubly hard. But I don't really care what these people names are. At the end of the day, I know God, and I know what He's going to do. And if I didn't know something before I read it, I know it now. So I'll just stumble upon them names, and I'll make names up, and I might add some letters and some sounds in there, but at the end of the day, we going to get what we need to get from it. Right? Oh, that's it. It's because that's what it is. We got to look at this thing and see ourselves. We got to look at this and we got to see God. And when we get to these situations where it's like, okay, God, you taking too much time. I need you to make moves now. Well, where this person, they not hurrying up. I need you to change my situation. I need you to fix this thing. I need you to get me out of it. We could just look at it and see what happens when you move too fast. Because the point was that Samuel showed up. He showed up, so he moved too fast. And then we got to look at Jonathan and see that, you know what, I don't care what's in front of me. Yeah, they could have died. But he knew that, look, if the Lord wants to, whatever it is, whatever comes to us, but we walking in that direction, and whatever it is, that I will not fear it. I will not fear it. Yea, though I walk through the shadow of death, right? I shall fear no evil, for God is with, we gotta have that. Like, I don't look, we just gotta walk towards it. That's what you gotta get out of it. Because you might be in a situation where it's like, well, what do I do? Do I go hide or do I go forward? And just trust that whatever the situation is in front of me, that it's still something that God could handle. And that's what we walk away with. And that's all I have for today. Any more questions or concerns? All right. So next week, we made it a year. I said it in the beginning, I'm saying it again. We made it a full calendar. Yeah, but we made it a full calendar year, right? And so I'm thankful for that. And when we were here in the prayer service earlier, just praying, and just praying to God that people are learning and getting closer to him and wherever he wants to take us for next year, that he will. We are praying for everybody. We are praying for you continuously. And so we are thanking God for you, right? And Shirley, I'm praying for you. We are praying for you. If anybody crosses your mind, just if you see a name, think of somebody, don't know why, just say a prayer for them. Next week, we will be open to have Bible study in person and still virtually, because I know not everybody is here in Baltimore. And so it might look a little different on the screen, but for the most part, we will still be here if you guys are up to it. I'm here anyway, so if nobody shows up, it's not gonna make a difference to me. But I'm hoping that will help us, plus to have a physical place to go. You guys keep me in your prayers. Y'all know that tomorrow is my last day of physically working. And so, I am really in a situation now, but I'm like, Jonathan, look, I'm walking towards it, and whatever comes from it, it comes, because God could handle anything. And so, I'm a little bit like Saul too, a little scary. And I ain't gonna say I haven't done Saul-like things, to try to prepare, because I've done Saul-like things, but for the most part, in this season, I am trying to have that Jonathan type of confidence, just in knowing that the Lord could do anything. And so, keep me in your prayers, and, and the Bible study in your prayers, that, I don't want you to be praying that God put me in no humbling situations, but just that I remain humble. Okay. Just that I do remain humble. I don't need y'all to be praying that I be in no humbling situations. I think I have enough. But that I, have the heart to remain humble and keep him first. But I pray for your health. I pray for your healing. I pray for your strength. I pray for your confidence in the Lord, this season. I pray for all the things that you need that I can't think of to pray for, don't have the time to mention, but you know what it is, and God knows, and that's the main thing. And I pray that you pray more. I pray that you see God in everything. It does not have to be elaborate. It could truly just be, Lord, I thank you. I pray for you. God, I want you to do this. God, I want you to heal me. Lord, shrink this, destroy that, kill that, do this. He does it every day. It's not above him. It is not above him. Cancer is not above the Lord. I don't care how big it is. I don't care how far it spreads. It is not bigger than the Lord. It just is not. It's not. And that's it. And so we just gonna, just keep praying for y'all healing, just keep praying about everything. All right. And so keep coming. And anybody want to close us out in prayer tonight? Valencia, why don't you close us out in prayer tonight?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to gather. We thank you for this 1 year mark. Father, as we go into 2023, we just ask that you keep us under the shadow of your wings, that you will lead and guide us, direct us, help us to open up our ears, open up our spiritual ears and spiritual eyes, that we can hear you, that we can see you. Give us the heart to be obedient to your will and to your way, Father. Lord, we just pray healing and protection over each one under the sound of my voice. Father, we just thank you for the many greater things that you will show us and to have us do in these days that are yet to come. God, we walk in faith. Holy Spirit, we ask for your guidance. We thank you, we lift you, we worship you. In the matchless name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
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 And Nicole, this Taniqua, I wanted to say that I heard everything, and I received and I agreed with the lesson and what y'all were saying. Everybody points made sense. I just didn't talk because I'm at the basketball practice and it's loud here.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you, Taniqua. Thank you. It's okay. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. So we will speak to you soon next week, God willing. All right. And remember, those of you who are here in Baltimore, if you want to contact me, just come. But you already know Bible study. I'll be here at 6 if anything changes. Carla will send it out with the text messages, okay? And we'll see how often we do that, but definitely next week will be that first week. Now, if the snow on the ground, you know, we gonna change that. We're gonna be right here virtually, all of us. But until then, everybody be safe. Happy New Year. Thank God. I thank God we made it, right?
Amen.
Okay, blessings to all. Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Before we go,